Welcome to the next episode of Brandland. I'm your host, Garrett Justice, and I'm joined today by Jen-Janke, who's the VP of Marketing at Chargeback. Jen, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Great. It's great to have you on the show today. I'm really excited to dive into our topic today.
Me too. I'm excited to rant on and on about what I think.
Good. I'm ready to hear it. Before we jump into that, though, would you mind giving our listeners a little bit of a background on your career so far and what Chargeback does?
Yeah, the short story is my background mostly working with tech companies in the marketing department, obviously. But recently I did a 3-year stint as the VP of marketing at a running company. And that's where I really got passionate about the topic we're going to talk about today, about how to humanize marketing, because on the B2C side, I learned so much that we should be implementing on the B2B side. So with that, after I left the running company, I did start at Chargeback. I've been here 3 months, so not very long, but I'm already itching to turn some of these tips into the team here. But Chargeback, we basically help merchants retain more of their revenue by winning the dispute rates that you get from credit card holders. So it's a software that helps you capture and retain more money.
Sounds like a really, really valuable company for so many out there.
Yeah, especially with the rise of e-commerce lately and COVID, the increased spending online. So merchants are facing a lot more chargebacks. So we're just excited to be able to help them out.
Yeah. Speaking of COVID, how's this transition been for you? I know you said before we jumped on, you've been there for a few months now, but haven't even been in the office. Is that right?
Yeah, I finished my interviewing all remote, started my first day of remote, hired my team all remote. We've never met each other. So ups and downs on that, but with technology today, we're making it work.
Yeah, it's good. Different world we live in today, though. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Well, again, I'm really excited to jump into our topic today. You already previewed it for us. And so our topic today is just on humanizing marketing, especially in the B2B space. And I'm just really excited to jump in and pick your brain on this. And for those out there listening, Jen knows her stuff. She's been one of my go-to people for the last few years as I've had questions in the space. So really excited to dive in and pick your brain today, Jen. And so, just to start us off here, before you and I jumped on this recording, we were talking about this shift happening in B2B marketing towards being more human, right? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think oftentimes in the past, we picture B2B as like a very formulaic process. There's a funnel or a series of steps you have to go down to convert, but we often forget that we're all people behind all of those steps. So someone once shared with me the story of the elephant and the rider. So you have this huge elephant, and then you have this person on top, the rider, trying to direct where to go. And that rider is the logic in all of us, where the elephant is the emotion in all of us. And so no matter how hard that rider or that logic tries to tell you to go left or right, the elephant, the emotion's so big, it's going to go where it wants to go. Mm-hmm. So having that visual in your head kind of helps you we all make decisions based off of emotion first, and then we back it up with logic or data or feature set second. And I recently read this study, and it had an interesting, because I do still like data, even though this is about emotion. It did say that impact of personal emotions on B2B purchases. It was found that 71% of buyers who see a personal value in a B2B purchase will end up buying the product or service. In fact, personal value had 2 times the impact on the buyer than the business impact did. So again, we all choose stuff because it impacts us personally and how we do our jobs better, easier, faster. And then the business impact is secondary in our minds. So really touching that person.
I love that. I think that that's such an awesome change that's coming about. Sometimes the changes that come about aren't so good. This is a change that I really like, especially I think for B2B companies that are often so data-driven. When you're so data-driven, you often tend to lean towards that logic like you talked about, and you forget about the emotional side of things. And that's how people buy, right? Regardless of whether you're buying B2B software or a new pair of running shoes, emotion is such a big part of that, right?
Yeah. And we often, forget about it because we get so just focused in our world and on that data.
Yeah. So with this change that's happening, what do you think is at risk for the brands who aren't humanizing their marketing?
Yeah, I mean, the simple short answer is like everything's at risk, right? Like it's in the end, you're not going to gain as many clients and capture that revenue. And it all starts with marketing, right? We're at the very top of all of this funnel. So how we treat and interact with our prospects, we need to be more human, because then it goes on to the sales team who actually are human. And then it goes on to the customer service team who are human as well. So if we kind of mess it up in the beginning, we don't get the chance to get all the way down to that customer success side and to have gain clients, but also keep them long-term.
Yeah.
So recently at Chargeback, we lost a really big deal because it's all emotion. She's like, you have a way better product, but we're going with our competitor because I know them. She'd used them before. It was just an emotional tie, even though she knew our software was better. And that hurts me. Like, we couldn't show her that human connection and stuff. So she went back to her current provider.
Yeah.
I hate those stories. Yeah.
It's so interesting and so true. And I think it affects all of us today. And, it seems so obvious, right? When we think about it, like, yeah, everything's at stake here. We need to be more human. But, when we think back to how marketing was done, especially in the B2B space 10 or 15 years ago, do you think that was really the case? Were the stakes as high, or are they getting higher is it more important now than ever before to be human, right?
Yeah, I think actually the stakes are higher now because of all the online digital stuff. We all know the stats about how many people have already made up their mind before they even start the buying process, or by time, they get to a salesperson. So because of that, I think it's even more important that we need to be more conversational. We need to be more human in all of our online interactions.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, cool. I am very excited to jump into these tips. So Jen has 5 tips for us. 5 ideas for how to be more human in B2B marketing. So I'm ready to jump in. Are you? Should we do it?
Yeah. You know me, I love a good list.
Okay. So tip number 1 that Jen provided for us is use normal human words. Tell us a little bit more about that.
This is one of those things that's completely obvious, right? But until you actually stop and think about it for a minute, then you're like, oh, you're right. I know this. I need to do better at it. I go back to the thing of how many of us have created like value props or mission statements or pitch decks that the sales team never uses. All of us, probably because we spend so much time crafting every single word. It doesn't sound like a human is speaking or wrote it. And so they can't say it in their voice. They're not going to just be robots and repeat it. So just, throw the buzzwords away, throw the big long sentences away, just be authentic, use humor if you can. It doesn't have to be super, super funny, but there's like a lot of ways to be clever and witty and still engaging, and just be yourself, be your brand. Just watch the words you use. And a good tip is I always try to read my copy out loud, whether it's an email, website copy, whatever. And if you stumble over the words as you're reading your own copy out loud, that's where you might want to go back and look and see how you can change it to make it more conversational, more human-like.
Yeah. I love that. I've noticed that a lot, that we have such a lingo, especially if you work in tech or in B2B or any industry does, right? I've actually the last few months have kind of had a personal goal where I'll identify a weird word that I use often, like iterate, right? Is such a tech B2B word that we talk about internally all the time. And I've tried to limit those and focus on limiting or eliminating a word that's like that's just kind of funny out of my vocabulary, every week or so. And sometimes it's good to get the advice of other people who are outside of your space. I know that my wife's actually been helpful in calling that out for me sometimes. I might use a word like iterate or something else, right? And she says, that's kind of an interesting word choice. Like, is that something that you use a lot of, you know what I mean? And so sometimes it's hard to notice that. So I like the suggestion also of reading it out loud, getting input from others, and making it just sound conversational and human.
Yeah, I think a brand I recently discovered that does it well is Clara. And Klarna is it's in the payment world, so you think it could be like all stuffy. It's about helping online merchants collect payments. They could have said like the best in class world leader of on-demand payment technology for e-commerce merchants, like, because that's what they do, and that's very what we would want to say. But their tagline is payment experiences shoppers love. 4 words.
Simple.
Nice, short, and simple.
Yeah.
And that's all you care about as a merchant, is that your shoppers have a great experience.
Yeah. I love that. That's awesome. Cool. Well, that's an awesome tip. Should we move on to tip number 2?
Yeah.
This is my favorite tip from Jen. I love it. It's stop weeing all over yourself. Tell us about that, Jen. What does that mean to wee all over yourself?
Never forget this, because it's been at least 15 years since the boss told me this, and he's like, Jen, we're weeing all over ourselves. And like, what does that mean? And so I reread the copy, and he underlined every time I used the word we in a paragraph. We do this. We are great at that. We have this many clients. We are all over ourselves. So it's just a great opportunity to notice that and just flip the wording around. Instead of saying, we do this, put it in the minds of the reader, like, what's in it for me? Why do I care? Type thing. So we help companies create brand advocates, turn your customers into brand advocates. There's like little subtle things you can do. So don't we all over yourself.
Yeah, I love it. That's great. Are there times or certain types of copy where you feel like it's appropriate to talk about we as the company, and other times when you shouldn't, even though we tend to?
Yeah. I think obviously on like the About Us pages, or when you're trying to say, like, we get the question all the time, like, how are you different than your competitors? Like, obviously there's times where you want to, be like, well, we are great at this and we do this. But I think too often we default to that first. Yeah. Especially on the website, especially when we're just we get too caught up in trying to be, here's why we're so much better than our competitors. But really you want to talk about what's in it for the customer or the prospect more. So
I think that makes total sense.
Yeah. And even 15 years later, I catch myself still doing it. But now that I see it, I go back and underline the we's in the paragraph. And, you can use it once in a sentence, but I don't need to use it every sentence, things like that.
I think that's a great tactical tip too. When you write a piece of copy out, just go through it and underline all of the we's that you see in there, right? Or anything that refers back to talking about yourself. And it can kind of just help reorient, and get you in that mindset of talking about the customer and having them be the hero of your story rather than you, right?
Yeah, and I often find that it actually helps you write shorter sentences, because you have to flip and you have to look at the words, because it's harder to write really concise and short versus really long and we can go on forever about ourselves. So
awesome.
It helps a couple ways.
Wonderful. Wonderful tip. Okay. Tip number 3, talk to your customers more. This seems like something that, of course, we all know, but we struggle with it. Why do we struggle with it so much, and how should we do it better?
Because we have a list of 1,000 things to do each day. And so that's more important, is like, getting that campaign going or creating this, that we often think like, well, I wrote those personas. We already know our audience. We know who we're talking to. Like, I don't need to do that. Let's go. We got other things to do, right? It's just, we're busy and we do it. But I find the moments that I actually stop and go out and talk to customers or talk to prospects or sit in sales calls, or, I love to join QBR, like quarterly calls that the customer success team does, because I always get an aha moment every time that I do. A recent example is I have, again, been at Chargeback 3 months now, and they had awesome personas developed. For a startup, they had them fleshed out, everything about them. I was like, awesome, this is great, we're set. But then I was in a conversation, and so with the Chargeback, a merchant, a purchase is made, you get that money because it's charged on a credit card, you make the sale, it's complete. If the customer disputes the charge and files a chargeback, Visa or MasterCard will just rip that money away from the merchant and be like, sorry, that sale you made, no longer good. And so they were talking about how, like, with chargebacks, they feel like they have no sense of control. Like revenue goes away. And that's what freaks them out the most, versus our messaging is all around increased acceptance rates and increased win rates. But with that, I'm like, there's some emotion in there. Like, you earned that money, you want to keep it. So we're launching a new campaign all around it, and time will tell if it works, but all around that, you've earned it. So let's help you keep it, all around keeping that hard-earned revenue. So I'm hoping that touches the emotions. And then the next one is, oh yeah, and by the way, we can help you increase win rates and lower dispute rates. And
love it. That's such a great idea for a campaign. And I love that it came from that inspiration from talking to your customers, right? So much of the great stuff does, and we just forget to do it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was like almost in passing, they said it, but it was like, oh my gosh, go back to that, dig in deeper. And so I find if you just make the time to stop and do it, you'll just continually get better. Another tip at a company I worked for a while ago, every Friday, someone would schedule an interview either with a prospect or a customer, and whoever in the company wanted to jump in and just listen to it, they could. So it started out as like a product type interview, but they just evolved it to let whoever wanted to jump in. And those were always so great if I could just hop in those calls and listen in. So.
I love those. Yeah. I mean, some things that I've really loved is listening to sales calls or our customer success team as they're working with existing customers and jumping on, listening to some of those calls, like you mentioned. I also love, going to trade shows when we're not in this COVID bubble, right? And talking to prospects and customers there. I was talking to someone the other day about a customer advisory board or a CAB where we bring customers on site, and like those are just so valuable when we do those, and we can just pick their brain and hear their stories and hear their own words that they're using as they describe things. So many insights from doing those types of things.
Right. And you always are like, oh, I don't have time to go to this conference or this trade show. But then you go and you never regret it. Right.
Yeah. So I guess to that point, how much is there too much? Like, how much should we be talking to your customers? Is there like a baseline or a benchmark that, you kind of have in the back of your mind? Is there a trigger point when you're like, it's been 2 weeks, it's been a month, I need to talk to someone again. You know what I mean? How often are you actually doing it?
Oh, that's a good question. And I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I think it's more like if I feel like we're struggling with something, or we're not quite getting the right message out there, that's when you're kind of like, okay, wait a second, I haven't talked to anyone for a while. Let me go out there and talk to them.
Can kind of be that trigger.
Yeah. So just look at it. If you're struggling, why are you struggling? Because something's not falling into place. So could it be you just need to sit down on a customer call or, get out to a conference or something?
Yeah.
Sorry, no good answer there.
That's okay. I don't either. That's why I want to ask. It's different everywhere, and it's different for different stages of companies. Usually I find for me, it's something that's like, it's different times and seasons. So there might be times where I'm working on a big project where I want to go in deep and listen to a lot of stuff. And then there might be a couple of weeks where I don't, and then something triggers it, like what you talked about. I'm reminded again, and I kind of go back to it. So I think that's okay. I think that's normal. The important thing is that we're doing it, we're realizing it, and we're making the time for it, right?
Yeah, it's not once a year. It's more than that, but what is that cadence?
Exactly. Yep. And whatever the cadence is, it works for you and it's enough, right? So great.
And it doesn't always have to be you. Remember, your team can go do it too and come back and report. Make it a goal every month. Everyone has to talk to one customer and then come back and share your findings, something.
Yeah, actually, on that point, one thing that our team has done, which has been super helpful, is it's not a set cadence, but it's periodic. It's usually about once a quarter or so, maybe a little bit more often, where we'll pull our whole marketing team together and we'll listen to clips from a couple of sales calls. And just to hear people talking and what are they talking about. And it's always so insightful every single time we do it. So I definitely am an advocate for doing that. And as a marketing leader, pulling everyone together and encouraging them to do it.
To do it. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right. Tip number 4, create good content when the timing is right for your customers, not for you. Tell us a little bit more about this one.
I think it hurts our egos as marketers to be like, well, we created this great piece of content. Everyone should want to read it right now and sign up with us right now. But that's not how it works. Like, it all depends on where the prospect is in the buying cycle, or where, if they have a problem or not at that moment. And I think the other big thing with this is, there's been a lot of discussion around this, especially on LinkedIn lately, is how the sales emails go. They send you an email like, hey, we can do this for your company. Let's chat. You ignore it because it doesn't provide any value. It doesn't give you anything. And then they send you another email like, hey, did you get my email? Let's chat. And then you get the other email that's like, Jen, where are you? Did I do something to offend you type thing? Like, come on, we wouldn't talk to a friend that way. So why would we try to talk to a stranger that way to guilt them into engaging with us, right? So it's all about creating great content and having it be out there and ready for them when the time is right for that person to engage with them. Because if it truly is good content and good timing, then that's like the magic formula for them to be ready to engage with you. You can't force those interactions, which again, we try to do as marketers because, you know, we were used to this funnel of you're a lead and then you get so many points and you do so much stuff. That's not how it works in real life.
Yeah, no, that's so right. It reminds me of a few episodes ago, I talked with Heather Hurst, who is a good mutual friend of both of us, right?
Yes, she is.
And Heather mentioned something like this as well, that she said that she had a boss, I think at one time, who asked her, you know, why are you publishing this today, whether this blog post or this piece of content, and why today, you know, why now? Well, and usually the answer is, well, because we finished it today or we're done with it. But thinking through that lens of what does your customer want and why would they want it now, right? Whether it's when you publish it or whether it's when you distribute it to them or whatever it is so valuable. And I think it ties right into exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. And so it's, yes, the timing is crucial and the right content is crucial as well. I was digging into my new team, and our content person I was asking her, oh, what do you do? Tell me about your day, like trying to get a feel for her world. And she's like, well, I write 2 blog posts a week. And then she moved on. I was like, whoa, why do you write 2 blog posts a week? Well, because that's what I was told like 3 years ago when I started. I'm like, okay, let's write blog posts that the timing's right and the content's right. Let's like be more strategic in what we're doing, because just pushing out content, that's not valuable. It's just a waste of time. And it's not what our customers or prospects want either. They want really great content that helps them when they're ready to engage with us.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're getting close here. Tip number 5 is start
number 5
or project at a time. One piece or project at a time. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. So as we're talking, if you're like me, you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do, so much I can do better. Like, hold on, I'm freaking out. No, just start with one thing at a time. Start with what you're working on now. Look at it. How can you use more human words? Are you wee-weeing all over yourself? Like, is this content really valuable? Just start with whatever you're working on now, and just everything you do going forward, have that same lens on it. You don't need to redo your whole website at this moment. You don't need to redo your whole content strategy. No, just start with what you're doing and get better as you go on. Don't try to tackle too much at once. Bite-sized pieces and you'll get there.
I love that advice, because I think so often people hear awesome tips like this shared and it just inspires them to want to, oh, I got to go make a whole bunch of changes. But that can be really overwhelming also to figure out how do I go about this? How do I tackle this? Sometimes those big macro changes are needed when you're going through a brand refresh or whatnot. But so often we can make so much progress when we just implement a principle and improve it from there, and then look for ways to go back and fix some of the highest priority stuff that maybe we've done in the past, right? It doesn't have to be all at once, totally throw off the rest of your cadence, right?
Yeah, go back and look at your highest engaging content pieces and start with those first. That's a great tip. Or like at Chargeback, we need to redo our whole website. I'm not going to tackle that at once. I'm going to even just start with the header on the homepage to test that initial key messaging. And then I'll work on the homepage, and then we'll start going through the site. We're not going to relaunch it all at once. A, that's risky, right? What if you didn't hit the message on the mark? And B, like, it's just so much easier just to take it one step at a time. one piece at a time. Yeah.
Jen, these have been awesome, awesome tips today. So great. I think that they're widely applicable for even those outside of the B2B world. As we kind of wrap this up today, if there was one of these tips that we talked about, what would you recommend people take away from this, or what should they remember?
Yeah, so I've actually recently come in contact with a company called Drift. And Drift is amazing because they're all about conversational marketing. And they have a playbook out there that if you haven't read it, you should go read it. It's called The MQL is Dead. And in it, they have a great quote that says, there's no more B2B or B2C. There's just marketing and selling to real people like you and me. So that's the key takeaway. It's like, it's not B2B, it's not B2C. It's not marketing really, it's talking and creating conversations with humans and with people. So if that's the only thing you take away, that's the key, is just remember who's on the other side.
I love it. Drift is such a great example of this too. So I see their content all over LinkedIn and everywhere. And I think that they do a great job with a lot of these tips. So great way to summarize it. This has been so great, Jen. I really appreciate you joining today. You know, as we leave here, if there are listeners who want to get in touch with you or have follow-up questions, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, they can find me obviously on LinkedIn. It's actually Jennifer Black-Janke is my name on LinkedIn, or send me an email at jennifer.janke@chargeback.com.
Awesome. And we'll be able to link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes on the page.
Perfect.
So wherever someone's listening to this right now. So Jen, again, thank you for taking the time today. It's been great chatting with you and really appreciate these valuable tips. Hope you have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You too.